Today we're going to look at the issue of leadership and how the recession has affected leaders. We're going to look at some of the dilemmas and opportunities that leadership presents in this recession. Joining me in the studio today is Dr. David Butcher. Now, David, you've spent many years working alongside managers and assisting their development. What are your perceptions about the current situation?
Well, Steve, leadership is a very difficult subject to talk about. Everybody knows something about it because, of course, it's an everyday concept. But if you gather the evidence about what part leadership plays in the sustained future of an organisation, it's contradictory. It's very difficult to be clear what part it does play, even as to whether leadership makes much difference in the long term. Because you can find organisations where people say, well, the leadership is terrible, but actually we survived despite it. So I think it would be fair to say that the recession or periods of sustained difficulty can highlight what part leadership will play in the future of an organisation, the part it can contribute.
And yet at the time, and now I hear it time and time again, a lot of people are very clear that what's gone wrong is the leader's fault, or what needs to happen now is more leadership. How do you respond to that?
Well, at a level, it must be true. It must be correct to say that somehow or other leadership, and therefore sometimes individual leaders, have failed their organisations. But I don't think it's as simple as that, and therefore what we can learn and what we can do to improve the part leadership plays is a little bit more complicated. And what I mean by that is that if anything, the recession, difficult times, highlights two things in particular that do seem to be fundamentally important, and therefore what leadership can contribute. Now, one of those is that if you're going to build an organisation for the future, you must think hard about it. You can't make snap decisions. You have to be well informed, and you have to discuss that. It has to be some kind of debate, a collective task if you so wish. And the second thing I suppose it particularly highlights, the recession, is that leadership has a moral dimension to it, and I think you alluded to that just now. And that's why, of course, people will say, well, our leaders have failed us. But again, it's not that simple, because often from one person's point of view, what the moral task is not quite the same as somebody else's, and leaders will take things into account that other people can't see sometimes. They're difficult decisions. But those two things, the need to discuss and to share the decisions and do that thoughtfully, and secondly to ensure that there is a moral dimension, which of course comes from what society expects, are very, very important part of I think what we can take from the leadership task in the recession.
So let's take this a bit farther then. What are the implications of this for organisations?
Well, if I take those 2 points that I've raised, first of all, the question of how you get enough informed discussion and take the time to do it. Obviously, education plays a part. Executive education is a wonderful illustration of that. Not that, of course, in the short term, we can invest in a lot of executive education. But finding the time and the space and the willingness to talk about issues and be very careful, like, for example, the fundamentals of cost cutting, to ensure that we don't somehow or other asset strip the organisation and therefore it has no future, or who, if we have to, we're going to lay off, and what the implications of that are for the business and of course for them. Those kinds of fundamental problems that managers face capture exactly the problem of the need to talk about it and think about it and take a wider perspective, and secondly be sure that, if you so wish, we've got the moral dimension well in place. So that would be a very obvious way in which the leadership task has important implications in the current situation.
So if I'm a manager in an organisation and I say, David, I really want to be a good leader, what would you ask them to do?
Well, if I can turn the question a little bit before coming to it finally and say what is it that organisations have to do to ensure that leaders can be good leaders. It is, of course, to give them that space to be able to discuss, to be able to talk, and to be able to educate themselves more, to be very, very much more clear at times about what's going on around them in the world than often they are. Not be surprised by the kinds of things that have befallen so many organisations in the last year. At a personal level, to come to your question directly, Steve, that is to say, for individual leaders in these difficult times, if we're talking about the need to take a position and to care about the organisation and what's going to happen to it, to have full countenance of the moral obligations and all those kinds of things, to spend enough time discussing because it matters so much what decisions we take, then quite obviously, fundamentally, for each of us as leaders in any organisation, we must ask the question right now, how much do we want to contribute to this organisation? And I think that is actually at the heart of leadership. At the personal level, that's the key question. How much do I want to contribute?
There's some challenging thoughts there. Thank you very much.